In 1984, there lived an old widowed lady by herself in a two-story house who was completely immobile and bound to her wheelchair. Ever since the mysterious death of her husband, she required the aid of a carer who would visit her daily to help her with everyday tasks. What made it even more difficult was the fact that the two floors of the house were only connected by an old staircase inside. When the old lady needed to move between the two, the carer would have to carry her frail body like an infant up and down the stairs. One day the police received a call from the widow. There had been a murder. Since police units were scarce at the time, and the murderer had already fled the scene, only one detective was sent out to conduct the initial crime scene report. He arrived to see the carer's body splayed out on the floor with her vocal cords ripped out and a pool of blood on the first level of the house, with the old lady atop the staircase in her wheelchair watching him, still and silently, seemingly in shock. He could immediately rule her out as a suspect due to her inability to move up and down the stairs, and because she was trapped up there the time the murder took place. It was similar to the death of her husband many years ago, who had suffocated in his sleep on the couch downstairs. The detective put on his gloves, took photos, swabbed for evidence, and covered the body until the coroner arrived later. All routine business. He scoped the house downstairs for any clues, then asked the old lady if he could look upstairs. She insisted that she was upstairs the whole time and no one apart from her had been up there that day, but regardless of this the detective ascended the staircase, to which she hesitantly moved aside. Beyond the staircase, there was a narrow corridor, with 3 closed doors along it. He checked behind each of the doors. The empty bedroom, nothing. The bathroom, nothing. He became anxious as he slowly made his way to the final bedroom where the old lady slept. He opened it and everything looked normal. A bed, a wardrobe and a bedside table with a lamp. He checked every wall of the room in horror, as it was not what he discovered, but it was what he didn't discover that made him stop dead in his tracks and slowly reach for his gun in its holster. It was a detail so minor that they had completely overlooked it on the last investigation of the husband's death. There was no phone upstairs. He suddenly heard a noise as he withdrew his gun and rushed out of the room, only to find an empty wheelchair atop the stairs. I really need to let this out. I can't bear to live with what happened that night anymore. Every time I close my eyes I can see the death in her eyes, and the malice in his. I had just recently moved out to Scotland with my fiancé. We had moved to a beautiful town in the north called Elgin. We were 2 weeks in. Everything was going well. We had settled in just fine. We thought we were going to live a long, happy life here. Oh, how wrong we were. On the 3rd week, strange things started happening to us. On one night that would change our lives, my fiancé received a phone call at 4 a.m., a strange time for anyone to receive a phone call. She looked up, blinded by the light on her mobile, and answered with a tired hello. This was followed by more hellos, and then she hung up. She said she could only hear a very faint screaming noise in the background of the phone. Unsettled, she turned her phone off so she would not receive a phone call. 5 minutes after the phone call, I received a phone call. This time it was just pure static we could hear, with laughing in the background. I immediately got very angry at this disturbing little game someone was playing with us. I cursed and told them to stop phoning. After that the static stopped and all that was heard was a huge bang on the front door. We both jumped. She clutched onto me, crying, terrified. I told her everything was going to be all right. I got up, told her to stay there, put on my dressing gown, grabbed a bat and walked to the door. I pulled the curtain covering the window on the door to find a message. The message read, "You shouldn't have left her alone." As soon as I finished reading, I heard a scream coming from upstairs. I immediately ran upstairs to find myself frozen at the entrance of our bedroom. There my wife was standing, blood dripping from her neck, looking right into my eyes, sobbing for me to help. And there was the thing behind her, that fucking thing that ruined my fucking life. It was a tall, completely naked creature, humanoid in shape. It was completely bald and had very skinny limbs. You could almost see its bones. Its face was the most horrendous thing I had ever seen in my life. It had a huge smile on its face, stretching right across, and had completely bloodshot eyes, one significantly smaller than the other. I had never felt this feeling before. I couldn't do anything. I was literally frozen. I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even say how sorry I was, and all I could do was cry. This creature slowly crept towards me, with my fiancé in his clutches. His face came down to my height and he looked right in my eyes. At this point he started to scream. However, all that came out of his mouth was static. I was terrified. He ran back very quickly to the window and jumped out with her. As soon as he left the building, I fell to the ground. I jumped up to look outside to see if I could see her with it, but they were nowhere to be seen. 2 days later, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept. I had just been researching to see if anyone knew what this was, if anyone had ever related to me. I had filed a missing persons report at the local police station who was extensively investigating the disappearance. Nobody had ever heard of this thing that I had seen. A month had gone by. Nothing had happened. I hadn't been working. I had barely slept. I could barely live anymore. I took a razor blade to my wrists. As the blood seeped from my wound, it felt like all of the pain of the past events was flowing away. I looked up from the bathroom sink to the mirror, and he was there, smiling just like before. Blood dripped from his eyes as he held my fiance's head up, severed from the body. Again he screamed static and I fell to the floor. I felt my body growing weak as my wrists bled. I was terrified to look at the mirror, but I felt I had to. As I slowly rose from the ground, my reflection matched his. I was looking right into his eyes, where my eyes should have been, where my body should have been. I slowly raised my hand, and in the reflection I was holding her head. As I looked to my right hand, there it was. I was holding my wife's head. I screamed and dropped it, but my screams were static as the blood began running thick and black. I knew I was coming close to the end. I felt my body going cold. Surely I couldn't have killed my fiancé, surely not. I fell asleep. I woke up in a hospital bed, confused, wrists bandaged. As I awoke, 2 policemen walked into the room and told me they had some questions for me. They told me her head was found in my house, and that I was not going to be going anywhere for a while. They told me to rest and that they would come back later. As they walked out of the room, one of them turned round and said, "Oh, and one last thing." His mouth then opened incredibly wide, and the only sound that filled the room was pure static.